Okay, so here we are in Cora, or in the parish of Cora, which is one of the parishes that the Ilen River runs through. And it's actually one of my favourite places in West Cork because there's so much here. We've got the river, which you might be able to see behind me. There's a bridge and an old ford there. And on the other side I'm actually looking at the Cora graveyard, which has got some fascinating tombs well worth an exploration. And beyond me still there's a mound on the hill which is probably an old ring fort, or some people suggest that it's more than a ring fort, that it was perhaps a settlement back in the medieval times, which might be why Cora is here in the first place. Now, if it was a settlement, it could have been a monastic settlement, and it's probably true that any monastery had to have a decent water supply. So to build a monastery right on the banks of a river makes a lot of sense. That's probably why, if this is indeed an old monastic site, that it's right beside the river here, and the graveyard is also beside the river. Now, interestingly, Cora itself, the present-day settlement, is quite away from here. So it's strange, isn't it, that we've got the graveyard out here like this. But my view, I suppose, is that it could have been a monastic site, in which case there would have been a church here once. Now, if you look at the historical records, you'll find that there are records that say there never was a church here. On the other hand, there are other records that says yes, there was definitely a church here in the 17th century, but it was fully destroyed in the late 17th century. And in fact, the stones from the church were used to build the graveyard wall, which I'm looking at right now. It's a very fine stone wall, and it could well date from, let's say, the 17th century. And I'm really fascinated by the place because there's so much history. And when I wrote a series of articles about the River Ilen for River Ilen Journal, which is where the whole thing began, I determined to come back to Cora because I could see there's so much more history to find here. But the river itself, originally it was called River Ilen, which is an Irish word which simply means the name Eileen, I gather. So, the river is called the Eileen in English, we call it the Ilen here. And it's a major waterway going right down through West Cork, and yet very little has been written about it, which is why I decided, well, let's have a look at it. And Finola and I, in our Roaring Water Journal mode, decided to explore the river. So we went to every river crossing and every location where you could access it. And this is one of the really interesting ones because you can see the bridge behind me. This was a ford up until 1906, and then the Board of Works at the time decided they'd ford the river, they cross the river and build this rather fine, actually, it probably doesn't look very much, but it's quite a major structure, steel girders and concrete on stone pillars. And on the other side, if you do come to here, and I do recommend you come here to have an explore, just go down to the other side of the bridge, turn left, and you'll see the old ford. You can still see the original flagstones on the bed of the ford there, and well worth exploration.